knew like muscle memory. Systems he accessed through an old burner phone and a favor from someone who still owed him their career. And quietly, invisibly, the Mafia's financial arteries began to clog. Trucks stopped moving. Payments bounced. Partners grew nervous, and nobody could figure out why. Because all eyes were still on the fat black farmer who seemed too slow, too harmless to be the source of their problems. And then came the night they crossed the line completely, breaking into his house while he slept, or thought he slept, because Eli had already moved his bed months earlier, had already reinforced the walls, had already memorized every footstep on his property. And when the intruders entered, confident and loud, they were shocked to find themselves disarmed, zip-tied, and sitting on his kitchen floor within seconds, staring up at a man whose eyes were no longer soft, whose voice no longer trembled, and who recited their names, addresses, and criminal histories without looking at a single note. And that was the first crack in the Mafia's confidence, because fear spreads faster than loyalty. And when those men were released the next morning miles away with a simple warning, "Leave the farm and forget you ever saw him," they laughed it off publicly, but privately started to panic, because intimidation only works when the other side is afraid. And Eli Carter was not afraid. He was methodical. And from that point on, the story stops being about a farm and starts being about exposure, because Eli didn't fight them with guns or fists. He fought them with information, leaking just enough truth to rival gangs, just enough hints to federal task forces, just enough inconsistencies to make prosecutors reopen cold files. And every move was calculated to look like coincidence, like bad luck, like the natural decay of a criminal empire that had grown lazy. And when the Mafia finally sent their top fixer, a man who had survived 3 wars and a dozen indictments, he arrived expecting a frightened landowner, and instead found a chessboard already 10 moves ahead, because Eli knew him too, knew the case he thought had vanished, knew the witness he believed was dead. And when Eli spoke the fixer's real name, the room went silent, because names have power. And the fixer realized too late that the farm wasn't the target. It was the trap. And the twist no one saw coming was that Eli had never intended to keep the land, because the land was bait, a pressure point, designed to draw the Mafia into the open. And when federal agents finally raided warehouses, seized accounts, and arrested leaders, the official reports credited anonymous tips and interagency cooperation, never mentioning the quiet farmer at the center of it all, because Eli didn't want credit. He wanted closure. And yet the final twist came after the arrests, when a young local deputy knocked on Eli's door with questions, piecing together rumors, noticing patterns, and instead of lying, Eli told him the truth. Not the whole truth, but enough. And that deputy would go on to build a career on integrity rather than fear, proving that Eli's last mission wasn't about revenge, but about choosing what kind of future replaced the rot he helped remove. And when the farm was finally quiet again, Eli sold it, moved on, and vanished once more, leaving behind only stories that no one quite believed, because America loves legends, but rarely recognizes them while they're still alive. And somewhere, out there, maybe at a gas station, maybe on another forgotten road, a man with a heavy body and watchful eyes is living simply again, hoping no one ever mistakes him for an easy target. Because the real lesson of this story isn't about the Mafia or the FBI. It's about underestimating people based on what you think you see. And if this story pulled you in, surprised you, or made you rethink who the real power players are, subscribe right now, because these are the stories they never tell you on the news, and the next one might be even darker, deeper, and closer to home than you expect. If you think you've seen every Mafia story out there, stop scrolling right now, because this one flips the table. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and buckle up, because this is the kind of American story that starts on a quiet dirt road and ends with powerful men begging for mercy, and you won't believe who they picked the wrong fight with. On the edge of a forgotten Mississippi County road, where cornfields roll like tired waves and the air smells of soil and rust, stood a lonely farm, owned by a man the locals called Big Eli, a fat black farmer with slow steps, a soft voice, and hands always dusty from work. A man so unremarkable that people forgot him the moment they passed his sagging wooden fence. And that was exactly why the Mafia chose his land as their next target. Because from the outside, Eli Carter looked like the perfect victim, a widower with no kids. No visitors, no flashy life, just acres of farmland sitting right where a new smuggling route would cut through the county. and the men in suits who studied maps in dark rooms believed that intimidation would be enough, because intimidation always worked on people like him, or so they thought. Eli had come to the farm 5 years earlier, buying it quietly with cash and never explaining where the money came from, telling neighbors he just wanted peace, raising chickens, fixing tractors, and keeping to himself. And when the first Mafia scouts arrived, pretending to be land developers, Eli listened politely, smiled, and declined their offer with an almost apologetic calm, which only amused them, because men like that always folded after the second visit. Except Eli didn't fold. He just went back to feeding his animals and repairing his fences. And that refusal triggered a chain reaction that would unravel an entire criminal network. Because what the Mafia never knew, what no one knew, was that Eli Carter wasn't just a farmer. He was a former FBI agent who had spent 2 decades dismantling organized crime syndicates from the inside. A man who had faked his own death after a case went wrong, buried his badge along with his old name, and disappeared into anonymity, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. And when the Mafia sent their first warning, a burned shed, a dead cow, a bullet through his mailbox, Eli stood in the morning light staring at the damage, breathing slowly, feeling a part of himself he thought was dead quietly wake up, because the habits never really leave you, the instincts never fade. And the moment he saw the angle of the bullet hole and the sloppy way the message was delivered, he knew exactly who he was dealing with and how careless they were. And still he did nothing visible, because Eli had learned long ago that the most dangerous man in the room is the one who looks like he's doing nothing at all. So when the Mafia escalated, sending enforcers late at night to scare him, they found lights off, doors unlocked, and a farmer who raised his hands and spoke, gently, offering them water, listening to their threats like a tired uncle listening to children argue. And that only made them angrier, because predators hate when prey doesn't react the way it's supposed to. And the next week his bank account was frozen through a web of fake complaints and shell companies. Yet Eli didn't panic, because he had expected that move. And 3 days later, those same shell companies were flagged by federal systems that hadn't been touched in years. Systems Eli